Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today we're joined by Shannon Patterson from Benson, Copple, Patterson and Associates to discuss the state of our industry in 2025, the latest on DSOs and OSOs, and key do's and don'ts for practice acquisitions. Whether you're thinking about buying, selling, or just staying ahead of industry trends, this episode is packed with valuable insights. Let's get started. This episode was brought to you by My Ortho VA. Hey docs, is your team overwhelmed by endless admin tasks? Let My Ortho VA throw you a lifeline. With expert HIPAA-trained virtual assistants specializing in orthodontics, My Ortho VA helps streamline everything from billing and insurance to phone support and reporting. Right now, over 100 VAs are supporting 58 practices nationwide, cutting staffing costs by up to 60%. No onboarding fees, no long-term contracts. Just a simple, cost-effective way to transform your operations and focus on patient satisfaction. Brace for growth. Visit myorthova.com to interview your next best hire and align your practice for success. Hey docs, it's that time of year again. AAO 2025 is just around the corner and we can't wait to see you in Philadelphia. Jill Allen and Associates will be at booth number 2250, so be sure to stop by. Whether you're new and looking to connect, an industry partner, or a friendly face from the past, we'd love to catch up. And since this year's theme is the biggest party ever, we're kicking off things right with an exclusive happy hour sponsored by Provide, the leader in tech-enabled financial services for aspiring and established healthcare practice owners on April the 24th. Great people, great conversations, and the perfect way to start AAO in style. Spots are limited, so you must RSVP. Use the link in the show notes and be sure to mention Hey Docs to get your name on the list. But listen, guys, the fun doesn't stop there. Join us at our other co-hosted events, the Celebration Party on Friday and the Mary's List Party on Saturday. See you in Philly, and remember to come by and say hi at booth number 2250. Shannon, we are so excited to have you back on Hey Docs. Can you give us a brief introduction of yourself and your role at Benson, Copple, Patterson and Associates?
Absolutely. So Shannon Patterson, obviously with Benson, Copple, Patterson and Associates. Traditionally, we have been a valuation and transition firm, but as our industry has changed a lot over the last few years. So we used to traditionally help doctors at the beginning of their career and at the end of their career, and we were on pause in the middle. But what we found is with younger doctors, obviously seeking more employment opportunities post-graduation, we found that we also do a lot of transition work with work versus just a practice. So now we like to say that we specialize in practice and career transitions. So if somebody is seeking a transition in their practice, whether that is selling or adding a doctor for a partner, or for young doctors, if they're transitioning from one job to another or a job to ownership or to partnership, to give us a call, and we are advisors in that space.
Yes, and you are for sure my go-to group. You guys have been a lifesaver for so many of my clients or docs that are just reaching out saying, hey, Jill, I need some advice. And I'm like, I'll give you advice, but here's who you really need to talk to.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Yes.
I just have to point it out in case somebody missed it when I said Benson, Copple, Patterson and Associates. Since the last time we talked, obviously there's been a name change, and I just have to highlight that. And I would love for you to just talk about this just a little bit. I know it's not truly new, but it's new in the sense that we're forward facing and some new branding and whatnot. So can you I just want to give you some ground because I think that this is super exciting.
Oh, thank you so much. So yes, I've actually been a partner since 2018. We never bothered to do a name change just because it's a pain, right? It's expensive, it's pain, it's a lot. But it was time to definitely do that. And we have had a transition of our own. Chris Benson now he's actually no longer an owner, but he's still very much a partner. But Doug and I did buy his portion out because he is in the twilight stage. He's going to be around for 3 more years. We do not want him to go anywhere. So we've wrangled him into sticking around. So he's still going to be there. But yes, we actually went through a transition ourselves. So not only do we advise on it, but we just went through it. And it's a lot, even when you've been partners for a long time, for one of the senior partners to start that phase, it's a lot. So yes, we definitely have enjoyed it. We've enjoyed the rebrand and gotten lots of reach outs on it and appreciate everybody noticing it. And we've had a lot of fun with it, and great job to Neon Canvas who did that rebrand for us. We've really enjoyed it.
Yes, they did. They did a great job for sure. And I just want to say congratulations. I know that this has been there for a while, but I'm just glad to see your name up on things and wish Chris the best. What an asset he has been to our industry. And in my mind, I have this little funny where I see you guys picketing around 3 more years, 3 more years.
Yes. He's such a pillar for us. I was really fortunate. I talk to young doctors all the time about you need a coach and you need a mentor. And I've really been so fortunate to have both just at my fingertips in my firm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Chris is that cheerleader. He's that mentor. He's that you can do it, believe in yourself. And Doug is definitely more in the weeds and the details. And this is what you need to know and why you need to know it, and really helping me be better at things. And Chris giving me all that opportunity. But he's such a beacon of light, and he's not going anywhere. He's still around, but he's been absolutely amazing. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Let's jump into all the fun things I want to talk about having you back on Hey Docs again. One of the things that you and I can both agree on is that the orthodontic industry, oh my gosh, it is always evolving, right? Yes. The things we're talking about even a year or 2 ago is totally different than what we're talking about now and what we will be talking about probably 2 years from now. And because I know you guys just gather a lot of data, and I really feel like you are just our core source of information out there, I'd love for you to give us a little perspective on, I don't know, some of the bigger trends or shifts that you are seeing in practices, and maybe just different things that doctors who are selling or buying should be aware of as we're coming into 2025.
Absolutely. It's been a quiet buyer's market, right? So the last 2 years, we've had practices listed, and doctors are like, why doesn't anybody want to buy my practice? And what we saw is post-COVID student debt and inflation probably just had a lot of buyers deer in headlights. Yeah. And a lot of people really felt like employment was probably the best option post-graduation to get some experience, which is a great option. And we just saw a big shift in that, especially since COVID, but it's been coming for quite a few years. But what we're seeing this year, and we started to see an uptick in last year in the conversations of, I'm really ready to buy a practice. And so I think we're going to see a shift in that market. It has been really slow, and it's really hard. This is one of the biggest issues. I'm sure you see it on a daily basis too. It's really hard when somebody's been out, especially 3 years plus, because they're probably making $400,000 plus, right? They're probably in that $1,800 to $2,200 range, and they all of a sudden want to buy a practice. And what they don't realize is buying a practice, it's not necessarily as lucrative in the beginning as an employment situation, but obviously it's the quickest way to long-term wealth, and there's a lot of tax benefits, but there is a little bit of trade-off in cash at hand in that first year or two for sure. And so it's been a real struggle. And a lot of the practices that sell, a lot of people think there's these gigantic practices out there. People call me all the time, I want a $3+ million practice. And I'm like, good luck.
All the OSOs and DSOs.
All the OSOs are buying those. And a lot of people that are in that $3 million range, they either have an associate or they might have a partner on track. And so what I tell them all the time is that $3 million practice was $1 million practice 5 years ago. And that's what I suggest that you look at. It's really, if you're making that kind of money as a young doctor, it's great. But if your long-term goal is ownership, I hope that you're saving a good bit of that, quite a bit, at least 20 to 25% of that a year, and have some liquidity in the bank so that when you do start looking at opportunities, you're not putting yourself in a situation that something is unaffordable, because that $1 million practice is going to cash flow really well. And what's really amazing about this business, when you think about all the other businesses out there, when you buy a business that has a 40 to 45% profitability range, and you can pay this off in 7 to 10 years.
Yes.
It's amazing. So we are all about, and I'm so excited to talk about it, we are all about ownership. So that's probably one of the biggest trends that we saw last year. And then obviously there was a big slowdown with corporate affiliations. Those models have changed. The EBITDA values necessarily weren't quite as high as previous years. And we just didn't see a lot of acquisitions happening. We have seen a strong growth pattern in partnership opportunities, which is probably my favorite. I think with us being at 62% female, that partnerships are the future. I think that females enjoy working with each other. I think that they enjoy job sharing. They business marry very well. And I think that's probably one of the biggest predominant models in the future is going to be partnership opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. And I have many docs call me because we kind of work in the same realm here. And obviously you guys do the deal component of it. I just help with okay, so you're going to own a practice. Let's talk about how we're going to do that. Let's talk about what that's going to look like. But that is something I always say to my docs when we are looking at a potential for an acquisition or a potential for a startup, we can ride those parallel roads for quite a while. And I always tell my docs, we don't have to make a decision until either you're going to sign on the dotted line for a lease or a building purchase, or you have an opportunity to sign on the dotted line for an acquisition. And I feel docs right now should be keeping their options open because we just don't know what's going to come on the market, what is going to become available in their area when they decide that, okay, now's the time I'm going to start looking. And one of the things that I really love that you guys do, which I just really encourage all my docs, is to just keep an eye on practices that are coming up for sale. And if it looks like it's an area that you want to be in, at least make a call out and ask about it. It may or may not be the practice you're looking for, but I feel like the more you can find out to look at your options and to see what's available out there, I just think it sets doctors up just to be maybe a little bit more versed when they do make that final decision. Is it going to be a startup? Is it going to be an acquisition? Or maybe even a potential for a partnership if that comes available.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that you do a lot of startups, and I know a lot of people start up because there's not something around, but it's maybe a saturated market. So that is even more important to be aware if something becomes available, because I always say I wouldn't want to be 32 years old and buying a practice at the same time the other orthodontist is 32 years old buying a practice, right? So I would like to be the young guy in town. And so if something is coming up within those first few years of your acquisition, it's not a bad idea. And nowadays, doctors really have it in their head that I'm not necessarily going to sell this practice and walk out the door. A lot of doctors understand the timing, that it takes a lot longer to sell a practice than it used to. And hey, I'm willing to work 12 to 18 months. And so you have that help and you have that timeline to really merge those practices together and work with somebody like you to help them with the processes and procedures to make it a one doctor practice. But you have some time. You're not buying somebody that wants to scoot out the door after one patient cycle.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about, since we're on the acquisition topic, let's talk about some of, I don't know, what you would consider to be the more critical steps a doctor can take when on either side, when they are thinking about buying or maybe thinking about selling their practice?
Sure. So we work with a lot of sellers. So I'll start with that. We also do buyer representation, but I'm always talking to doctors that are looking to sell their practice. That's always a really fun phone call to have in the beginning,
Yes.
because one of the first things I say is your practice financially stable. Most of these doctors that are selling their practices, they're debt free, right? So they're just trucking along. And as long as the income stays the same, they're pretty happy, right?
Yep.
But
and a lot of times they think, oh yeah, everything's great.
Everything's perfect. So what about this 90 days past due?
Yeah.
Can you really collect this $200,000 you have here?
My goodness, yes.
Yeah. So the first thing I always ask people is, what is the financial stability of your practice? And are you ready to sell? What is your accountant saying? And if you're telling me you need $5 million for $1 million practice, keep working.
Yep.
And what is the market demand? I tell doctors all the time, I get a phone call probably at least once a month that I'd like to sell my practice by the summer. And I'm like, oh, okay, you should have called me last summer. Obviously, sometimes there are emergency situations where somebody needs to sell quickly, but I think there is a lot of myth out there of somebody's going to buy my practice as soon as I put it on the market. Yeah. And the buyer demographic, like we talked about earlier, has just changed. It's not just residents coming out of school. Actually, they seem to be a little more skittish. You've also got associates that are coming out, but they're looking for a certain cash flow. So a lot of times that puts smaller practices down the list. But then you've also a big footprint of acquisitions in the past 18 months has been established doctors acquiring an add-on, what we call an add-on acquisition, adding a practice. So you really have 3 ponds to fish out of as a seller. And they really sometimes have to really put their head around, well, I was really thinking somebody would just move here and take this practice over. An $800,000 practice could be challenging. So it might be a better footprint for that. So we always talk about market demand, understanding the negotiation process, the transition process, having the valuation done. Anybody that a lot of times sellers call me and say, doesn't the buyer help pay for the transition? We don't do dual representation. We just don't think it's the best thing for either party. I know there's groups that do, and that's absolutely fine as long as there's 100% transparency, but we want to represent just one party's financial interest. So really them understanding that, hey, it's going to cost you a little bit of money to help somebody understand what they're buying, having a valuation done and having a transition plan. How long do you want to work back? My buddy gets $2,500 a day. He sold to a corporate group. That's not what post sellers get in a private practice. It might be, depending on your practice, it might be $1,000 a day. It might be $1,500 a day. Do you want to work 6 months? Do you want to work 12 months? Those kind of things. And then also, what is the reputation of the buyer? What are you looking for? And finding potential buyers. Seek professional help is the biggest piece of advice I can give. You're an orthodontist. You're not a transition specialist. And it doesn't need to be your cousin's husband who's a CPA that doesn't understand orthodontic practice transitions, but somebody who does understand it. And as far as buyers, the same thing. What is the reputation of the practice? There's a lot of myths out there for buyers that we'll get into, but having an advisor to represent you and not somebody that, again, is sometimes family members are great, but you really need an objective view of somebody who understands orthodontic transitions. Even I see sometimes pull people in who do dental transitions and they get sideways over things and you're scratching your head saying, why they don't get paid $50 to be on call because they don't get called in. So silly things like that. But yes, it's a lot of work to prepare for that. And really working with a firm that really understands orthodontic transitions is the best starting point. And there's multiple options out there, but pick up the phone, call somebody and say, I'm thinking about selling my practice in the next 12 months. What steps do I need to do?
Yeah, for sure. And as I work with a lot of docs, and I call it my 8 years to retirement. And part of what we are doing is helping them get ready to have somebody really look at their books and really do a good evaluation. And one of the things that I just find so interesting, speaking to some of our senior docs that may be listening, is we got to look in all the closets. We got to just bear everything. And it's not a reflection on you that, oh my gosh, you don't know this, or how did you not know that? I'll speak to your 250,000 in credits on accounts, or this crazy amount of money that's been sitting there that should have been written off 10 years ago. It is so much better to work on getting things clean and getting things, even sometimes we'll work with doctors for a couple of years, up to 3 to 5 years, depending upon what we're working on, just to get it so that they can get so when they're ready to come to you and talk to you, they are set up and ready to go. Yes. They know where their statuses are. They know their delinquencies. They know that their books are clean and their ledgers look right. And even some of the systems that we're doing in the office are, are up to date, because what we're looking for staging a house, if we were to use this from a selling standpoint, is we want our house to have baked cookies and like not messy piles all over. Like we want it looking beautiful. And that is really what our buying doctors, our younger docs are looking for. But it's beyond them. As you and I both know, it's the banks. It's banks that really make that final decision. And if the banks can't make sense of the work, you can be like, oh, but my wife, she's really good at keeping these ledgers by hand. That could be a problem. We might need to talk about that.
Yes. And does your wife need to be replaced? Of course, everybody has their family on payroll, right? It's a smart thing to do financially. But when it comes time to sell, like you said, when you're working with doctors to clean up, let's go ahead and start looking at some of those things. Do those people need to be replaced? And if your wife does payroll, or if your wife does the marketing, then a buyer thinks that needs to be replaced, and that needs to be part of the practice overhead. And the doctor's family members aren't supposed to be in the practice overhead. If they do something, they are.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very much worth, like what you do, being able to go in and help somebody prepare for that, because there are a lot of steps to it. And we always can tell when somebody's worked with someone. It's funny when you get a phone call from someone who they really do think everything's in perfect health, and you ask them, what was your production, your collections, trying to get an idea. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. That's always, you have no idea what you produced last year. Or whenever you pull a status report, and do you really have 32,000 active patients?
Right.
No, probably not. Yes.
Right.
And for people that look at practices that they might see those things, those are all things that are okay. But again, having somebody to understand that and look at that is really important. And to speak to buyers with the lenders, it used to be that the bank would allow you to come in and pretty much buy anything, especially if you had experience. But now they are looking and they're asking for some production records, right? So we really talk to young doctors all the time about how important it is to know how many patients you can manage per day, how many new patients do you see annually, and how many starts do you have annually? Because the bank is going to ask that. And in some instances, we've even seen banks require that they see the doctor's production reports. So banks want to make sure that you're able to handle the workload that you're looking at. So they're not always going to do that. It's very rare, but it can happen. But really understanding what you can do as a buyer, and when you're talking to people, what can you handle? What are your expectations are really going to help you, because if you go into a practice that's doing 1.6 million and they're working 5 days a week, seeing 36 patients a day, it's like, we got some room right here where we can make this more profitable.
Exactly. We have got a problem, Houston. We've got a problem. We can fix it, but we've got a problem.
Exactly.
And now a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Hey docs, if you want to have a great business, the right practice management software is essential. But some can be slow, outdated, and lacking good support. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to all orthodontists. It's the fastest, most reliable, and most secure platform to grow your business and improve your efficiency. It's completely web-based, so you can run your entire practice anywhere and from any device, with no servers, no downloads, or hidden fees. They even have the most helpful and responsive support team around. Right now, Greyfinch is giving a $500 discount to our listeners. Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen to learn more and see why it's one of the fastest growing providers in America. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at getsmilesuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
But you don't have to look at that and think, oh my gosh, I can't buy that practice. That's perfect. You're like, oh, I've got some
low-hanging fruit right there.
Exactly.
Low-hanging fruit.
Exactly.
Or I love it when we see just a really nice fat obs pool but they're not really working it. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's like your savings account, $5,000 a pop. You got 300 people in there. Woo! Yeah. Those are the things, like you said, it may initially at first glance be like, oh, that doesn't look like a good practice. But on the other hand, if there are these little hidden gems, these little low-hanging fruits out there, boy, a doc that's actually paying attention. And not that our senior docs aren't, but again, they've gotten comfortable. They don't,
very comfortable.
Whatever comes into their bank account, as long as that keeps coming in.
Yeah, Susie's doing a great job in the ops program.
Exactly. And I don't really want to work that much harder. 30 is a good number for me to come in and work, where, I see it all the time. We'll get in there and our young docs that have taken over practices, all of a sudden we're bumping that 30 to 60 to 70, and we're consolidating days, and we're doing all of this. And boy, that's the fun. That's the fun part there.
It is. I'm so glad you brought observation up, because it's really amazing to me when I talk to employees, especially corporate employees, and they really don't have observation buckets, right? Because sometimes when you work, depending in the corporate affiliation, probably more DSOs, they're trying to really start. Yeah. And if you worked in a pedo practice, start. Mm-hmm. A lot of orthodontic practices, especially with doctors 55 plus, they're strong proponents of comprehensive treatment, waiting until Susie is whatever age, and understanding that observation bucket is really important, because that is a future lead. That is somebody that most likely you're going to convert if the practice has done a good job in observation. So young doctors don't sometimes understand the importance of that bucket, but they will very soon, right?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So let's switch gears here just a little bit. And I just want to talk, not that I like looking in the rear view mirror, but I would love it if maybe you could just, highlight maybe just a few common things that we saw in 2024 that you would say, hey docs, looking at 2025, let's try and avoid these costly mistakes that we saw with doctors buying or selling. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there were any major things in 2024 that were trends. I don't think there was necessarily any trends. I was a little surprised by some young doctors who really thought they didn't need the senior doctor to stick around, especially if they had been an associate for a while. I don't really need anybody to stick around. And they think, I even had some people who didn't want the doctor to stick around at all, maybe for a week or two. And I was really scratching my head thinking, really? Wow, that's crazy. Typically, we always recommend at minimum one patient cycle, preferably several. And new grads aren't doing that. But doctors that have experience, I think sometimes when there's always myths out there of having the seller on just really messed things up for me. I don't think so. You're buying a big part of the transaction is goodwill, and really being able to make sure that doctor can, one, introduce you to every single patient in treatment before they leave, huge, but also taking you around and telling people, hey, I could have picked anybody to buy my practice. I picked Jill because she was the best candidate. She's going to take the best care of my team and my patients. So I think that that was something we saw that I would not recommend, no matter how much experience you have. trying to keep that senior doctor around, preferably to me, I would say the 4 to 6 month mark, even on a smaller transition, is important. Yes, you're going to pay them, but even if they're only coming in the practice, if you can't afford them, 4 days a week, then do 4 days a week for 6 weeks, cut it down to 3 days, then 2 days, then 1 day. But it's going to help with the team. It's going to help with the patient still seeing them there. And then it also allows that when they reach out to people, letting them know, hey, I'm still here. Dr. Jill has bought my practice. She's going to be here as well.
Yeah.
And I really think marketing it that way. And then people going in and really being trailblazers when they go in and buy a practice. Staff doesn't like change. I don't like change. If somebody came in and bought our business and just wanted to change everything on day one, I would probably freak out. And so I do hear the great thing about buying a practice. Jill, when I first started in this industry 16 years ago, I would go visit a practice and it would have to be on a Friday, or it'd have to be sometimes after 5 so that no one saw me at the office. And they didn't want their team to find out. And the doctor could never go to the office when the team was there, because then the team would find out. So essentially, people were buying practices that they'd never seen in action. They'd never looked in a patient's mouth. They'd never met the team. Through years of education, I think we're really around that, and people really understand the importance of that. But even when you go in and talk to the team, telling them you're going to do it this way and that way can just cause a lot of anxiety. And you have to remember that the last thing you want is anybody to leave that practice the day you join. And so if you go in trying to be a trailblazer, I'm going to do it this way. And especially people who have experience, I've been doing it a different way and it's much better. You're going to create some waves. And so going in and just being really laid back in the beginning about trusting the processes and procedures is slowly making change.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a tough one because I see both sides of it for sure. And there are times, like I can think even in this last year, I've had a couple docs that literally have bought a practice and the employees didn't know they were bought until the day it happened. And there's a lot of work that we have to do to overcome that. And it's tough because I agree with you in a lot of your points, in the sense that if the relationship is good and the senior doc wants to be there and wants to help make it a good transition, I think it's great. When we have the ones that don't, it can be just as bad. And I think that you have to take it, each one of them. I think what I do know is when you guys are representing doctors, you've got those docs that are in it to help the other doctors succeed. And what I tend to find is a lot of times there are others that are out there that, that doc. Now, granted, we know there are just ones that just for health reasons or whatnot, circumstances are out of their hands. But then there are others that are just, it can be a tough thing. And to speak to the team, boy, it's tough. Change, like you said, that's not only are they now losing the institutional knowledge of the doctor that was there, but the stability of the systems that were there. And you have a younger doc coming in. And I agree. I usually try and tell my docs, like, I know we've got big plans, but let's try and at least give yourself a good 3 to 6 months before we're making big changes. We need to have a plan, and we know that we're going somewhere. And sometimes it's, we just have to change the operating system right from the beginning, or we just have to get us to paper from paper to, but I think that those practices I'm finding are farther and farther out there. And we're seeing more and more of what you're talking about, where our selling docs are, they have to be mentally ready to let somebody else step in and give the reins away and not become in the way. Because that, I think probably one of the biggest things I see is when the team doesn't know who's now who's making the decisions, and you've got a real strong senior personality and the junior doc is in there. I own it, but I can't say anything. So I think that there's pros and cons to all of it, but I do agree with you. We have to be so mindful. It's easy to be like, oh, it's just a business transition, but there are people that are very valuable to you involved in this, and we have to consider what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. If a doctor calls me and says they want a turnkey transition and to walk out the door, we have a hard time representing them. I tell them we might not be the best firm. We're typically working, and we really do educate the sellers to say, look, once this doctor buys the practice, you're not used to being an employee. You're needed for your support for the transition process and for your leadership skills, but you need to always defer to the new owner of, you know what? I'm so excited that Dr. Jill gets to answer that question now. So let's go get her, because now she gets to help you with that. And you really are, you are transferring, you want that doctor to be successful. You want your team to be taken care of. You want your patients to be taken care of. And if that's what you want, then it takes a lot of time and effort to pour into that young doctor to make sure that they're transitioned. But at the same time, you have to understand you're switching seats. Okay, you're not getting off the bus, but you're switching seats. And you should be happy. Most doctors, our doctors are. They're like, I can't wait to be able to hand the reins over to somebody who's going to be awesome, maybe better than I was.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of the process.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about DSOs and OSOs. As we both know, hot topic. They've been up, they've been down, they've been all around. and I think for many orthodontists out there, it's definitely something to consider. There are key factors to understanding the models of what these look like and how they might impact private practice purchases and transitions. And I'm just wondering, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on this, but maybe if you can just give us some basic insight. I know you alluded to it a little bit that some of the EBITDA payouts and things are a little different right now than they were, but maybe just give us a little bit of insight there on what you're seeing and what we need to be thinking about.
Sure. And I'm probably going to be a little more blunt than maybe I have been on this subject before. But if for any listeners out there that want to consider an OSO or DSO option, the days of selling your practice to a DSO or OSO are over. Okay. You're going to partner with a group. Okay. So they are not looking for people to sell their practices and take their foot off the gas. They're looking for people that want to be a partner and affiliate into an organization that can help you grow your practice. They're really not looking at it, or most groups out there, they're not looking for people to consider this as an exit strategy, right? Because they're buying the practice, but you're a big part of that. So that's why they've really changed the model to this JV model. And it's really beneficial to younger doctors because they can make a lot more money than the typical standard amount this is what you're going to make, but allows you to make more. But it also keeps you in. And it makes sure that you're invested in that practice and that you want to continue to grow it. They can bring a lot of resources and a lot of help, a lot of management. Let's face it, I've certainly talked to some young doctors in the last year that have struggled. It's like maybe practice ownership wasn't the right step for me. I'm a little concerned, struggling. You went to school to be a clinician. And I think that you really have to think about what does it take to own and manage a business. And it takes a lot. And that's one thing that they take that management piece off in private practices. I think when practices were $1 million on average, I don't think it was as much as it wasn't as it didn't have as much anxiety. It wasn't as overwhelming to own a practice. But now that our average practice is more like 2.2, 2.3, that's hard. And, Susie, who's been with you since she was in high school, might have a hard time managing a $2.5 million entity. And so the days of thinking about really having a COO versus an office manager, right? An office manager in a $2 million business, you have an office manager in maybe a corporate setting that reports to someone, but really having somebody that understands the data, they understand ROIs, that they can really manage the practice while you're a clinician. So I think that practices are probably going to have to step up and have some more like executive leadership in the practice, especially as you get bigger. And practices that are doing that are doing really well
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the doctor's not bogged down.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like can I have next Friday off? Or, oh, by the way, 3 people are on maternity leave this month. You're not having to deal with every single little thing. And it's somebody that you can trust. I think that a lot of doctors type A personality, they're still micromanagers, right? They want someone in that role that they can say, no, we're not going to do this. But really understanding that you can give that to somebody that can truly help you get to the next level is huge.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to probably see that change. But for OSOs and DSOs, I think that obviously it's been quiet. I think that they were holding on to their funds. I think we're going to see them deploy those funds. But I think they're going to be pretty specific on the practices that they buy. They want people that have the mindset that they want to grow, that they want to be part of something bigger, and they're looking for partners. But I do think that activity is going to pick up this year.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I've got so many thoughts and questions about this, and we might just have to do a whole nother episode on this, but it does make me think what that landscape is going to look like for doctors in another 5 years or another 8 years. Because I do feel like, as you and I think would agree, many doctors, we've seen it where, okay, if you're a 2 million plus practice, it's really difficult to sell privately, where, it was easy to sell out and have a 5-year out and be done. And I definitely can see this new model. Like, what is that going to do for some of our docs that have those bigger practices where they're like, no, really, I want to be done in 5 years. This isn't really what I'm looking for. So I've got questions about that. But then it also makes me think, what is it going to look like for our, I'll say, mid-career docs, that they aren't waiting till that 5 years to retirement type of a plan and a buyout, where they may really be looking at, gosh, if I can get in at year 8, year 10 and write it out. Now, when I have gotten to that point where I don't really want to have to keep managing this, because like you said, that middle level management, there is a big difference in what it looks like in a practice that's $1.5 million to a $2 million practice, and the hierarchy of our office setup than what it looks like for a 2 to 3 or $3 to $4 million practice. And you really are running you have to have a corporation mentality.
You're running a business.
Yeah, versus a small practice or smaller practice, even though I know $1.5 million isn't small, but in the grand scheme of it, it is. So, very interesting. Very interesting. I think that's just good things to be thinking about. And I will be definitely watching to see some of those trends and see what's happening, how that's going to play out for sure. One of the things, as we're getting closer to the end here, is I did want to, I don't know, just maybe pick your brain a little bit about anybody who's listening and they're thinking about, all right, what's my long-term future going to look like? What does this mean? Should I be scaling? Should I be selling? Should I be looking at transitioning? What's a piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice that you think docs should just be paying attention to if they maybe are on that mid-career, what should I be looking at place right now?
Sure. Interestingly enough, this isn't the answer I was going to give, but the way you framed it is a little different than what I was thinking. But I think right now, I came from medicine and I came from the clinical side of medicine. Stressful, right? And so I was very used to seeing burnout. And I was really, when I first came in this industry, I was like, these doctors are so happy. They're the happiest people on earth. They just love life. They have these amazing teams that never left. Everybody I know, my girls have been here, and I shouldn't say girls, but back in the day, they've been here 20 years and they haven't gone anywhere. And I've just had this amazing practice. And now I hear young doctors and the stress is there, right? And burnout is a very real thing in this industry. For anybody, no matter what stage in your career, is invest in yourself and your team. Your team, no matter how technology advances, your team is there to support you. So investing in yourself and your team and getting back into that routine of, instead of investing in every single piece of technology and IDB, everything you can do out there to do more, it's not everybody's happy at a $3 million practice. Some people are much happier at $1.5 million practice. Now, the big thing I see is if you have $1 million practice, $1.5 million practice, then you're working 4.5, 5 days a week. clinically, that's a challenge. What do you want? Outline your goals, not just your practice goals, but what do you want in life? What do you want? Do you want work-life balance? Do you want to pay off your debt? Do you want to scale and just have this humongous entity, multiple associates? But really hone in on yourself, reskill and upskill your team, work with a consultant. That's the biggest piece of advice I can get. People that work with Jill Allen, we know, we can tell, we see the difference. But it's true. For years, when we do all kinds of transitions and valuations, and the data is there. This is not, I'm not speaking this is data. Practices that utilize consultants and understand their numbers really do better. But there's so much out there right now, and it's not a cookie cutter approach to your practice life and what you want. You have to find what works for you, but invest in yourself and change up your meetings. I know there's so many meetings now, but going to the exact same thing every year and hearing the same speakers. I know the AA is doing a really good job of getting different people in there and some of these other groups, but going to something even outside the box. We did a Ritz-Carlton leadership course. It was just so nice to hear just a whole different objective, right? On how to do that. And also go to things that are going to help you. If you want to scale, then think about that. There used to be a group years ago called Strategic Coach. That a lot of orthos used to do to really help them understand that. But I think investing in yourself and your team is the biggest piece of advice I give people. And I just think people, for whatever reason, have gotten away from that. They're spending all their money on bells and whistles, and they're really not getting the business knowledge and what they really need to do to understand where they want their practice to be and how to get there. And I've heard a lot of doctors in the past year that have gone from 4.5 days to 3 days, just really cutting back and saying, you know what, I'm going to charge a little bit more and I'm going to work a little bit less. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely. Oh, such sage advice, we'll say there. And I cannot agree with you more. We can definitely do it differently and be successful. And it is probably one of the saddest things I see is when I have docs coming to me that are just so burnt out and they're in year 8 or year 10. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you still have all this time ahead of you. And we both heard the stories. So I think taking Shannon's advice there, anybody who's listening, definitely do that. There are a lot of tools out there to help you. We all know a perfect work-life balance that's the elusive unicorn. But I do think that there are tools out there to help us be successful and find some balance. And one of the things I always really work with my doctors on is you need to find time to work on your business while you're in your business. So that when you're at home, you get to enjoy your family and your littles will only be littles for so long and your family will only be around for so long. And you just don't want to be looking back and going, gosh, was staying late for those patients? Was it really worth missing all of the soccer games or the this or the that? So great advice there, Shannon. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, learn more about what you guys do, what's the best way that they can do that?
Absolutely. So go to our website or you can Google us, but Benson, Copple, Patterson and Associates. Our contact information is out there. But yes, please reach out if you have any questions about practice transitions or career transitions. It helps to talk to people, right?
It does.
A lot of people, use your resources. It's absolutely. So yes, would love for anybody to reach out to us anytime.
Yeah, that's great. As you remember, probably from the last time, I like to finish up Hey Docs with a little speed round. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. And I'll be honest, I have no idea what questions are coming. So this is going to be so fun.
Oh boy. Good. That's the way we like it. All right. What is one daily habit or a ritual that helps you stay productive or balanced?
Oh gosh, I read the Wall Street Journal every day. That's not answering your question, but that is one ritual that I have every day. And I tell young doctors all the time, you need to read it because what happens in the world trickles down to ortho. So it's a great resource.
Yep. I'm going to agree with you. I'm an Apple News person and it's like one of the first things because I just want to see all the things going on.
Absolutely.
What is your go-to strategy for getting unstuck when you face a tough problem?
Oh my goodness. My go-to strategy for getting unstuck. Probably talking to someone, reaching out, talking to someone like Chris. I just can't seem to get over this hurdle. Help me get over it. So reaching out to a peer that probably knows a little bit about your situation that can help you get over the hump.
Yeah, awesome. All righty. What is one, this is going to be a funny one, unconventional perk that you think every workplace should have?
Oh, a bar? No, I can't say that.
They do
You
it
know
on all
what?
the TV shows.
So this is so funny. I was reading the other day in the Wall Street Journal how a lot of employers are now offering pet insurance. And I thought that was the most interesting thing that I had read. I don't
Yes.
know if that's it, but I think that's just a funny tidbit. Most interesting perk. I love team events. We have a lunch every month with our team and we enjoy it. We cut back. We really don't talk about work. We just laugh and have a good time. And then we try to have a team event each quarter just to get away and forget about work for a little while. And
Yeah.
I think that's really beneficial.
Oh, I love that. All right. As we finish up, one piece of advice maybe you wish you had followed earlier in your career.
Go for it.
Love it.
Go for it. Execute the opportunities that you have. There's nothing worse than saying, what if? So explore the opportunities and execute the ones that you use use the opportunities that are extended to you.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to finish us up here. Shannon, thanks so much for being on Hey Docs again with us. It's always my pleasure to have you on. You always bring such a wealth of knowledge. And I know everybody to the very end here have been sitting on their seat like, ooh, that was a good one.
Thank you. Thank you. Always such a pleasure to be on here.
Yeah. All right. Until next time. See ya.
Thanks so much. Bye.